Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Emerald City Hockey Division preview. This part 2, we will be covering the Vegas Golden Knights, the Los Angeles Kings, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Calgary Flames. Make sure to stay for the end of this video where we will give our final division preview rankings or predictions. That's the better word that I was looking for. We're gonna do that at the end of this video. But first, RJ, before we get into any of these teams, before we get into anything, got to address the controversy from last week's video. All right, it's a controversy I created, so you can just sit back. You don't have to deal with this, RJ. I've got it. It's all right. And that was me, what I had to say about Thatcher Demko not being an elite goaltender. He's not going to steal games for you, all that stuff. Obviously upset a lot of Canucks fans. But here's the thing. I looked into it, guys. I really did. I really tried. I was looking at traditional goaltending stats, the advanced stats, all that stuff. Really did a deep dive into the analytics. And you know what? He finishes 11 to 15 in everything. Whether it's traditional goaltending stats, advanced stats, that's just where he is. And so, you know what, everybody who was upset at me for not calling him an elite goaltender, he's just not. I'm sorry. I looked into it. I gave him a fair shake. He's just above average, nothing more. Sorry.
All right, everyone, let him have it. All those of you who factor the eye test even just a little bit, let Dylan have it in the comments because he still hasn't learned his lesson.
Yep, come at the former scout with the eye test debate after I just did a deep dive into all of his analytics, trying to give everybody else the benefit of the doubt. But I'm telling you, Thatcher Demko, above average goaltender, good goaltender, not elite. There we go. All right, RJ, Vegas. I'm sure we won't find any controversy talking about the Golden Knights. Obviously, last year was a year in which they had to deal with just a ton of injuries. You know what I mean? Like it was just injury after injury for a lot of their top players. End up missing the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. Out goes Pete DeBoer. In comes Bruce Cassidy as head coach. So otherwise, I mean, not too many big shakeups over the course of the offseason. I think the biggest thing for them is going to have been the loss of Robin Lehner for this season, as he's out after his latest surgery. I think that's going to be their biggest thing, is just kind of figuring out the goaltending situation. Otherwise, it's just going to be, hey, can we get a full season of Mark Stone, having him around as captain of the team? What about Jack Eichel, right? We're now a full offseason removed from him having his neck surgery. He got in, a decent amount of games last season, but this should be the first full season with Jack Eichel in Vegas. So there is some interesting stuff to look at. RJ, it's basically tradition for you to pick, Vegas to just win the Stanley Cup every year because, I don't know, you have this weird fixation about them being the best team all the time. Tell me why they're going to be the best team this year, because I look at it and, that goaltending situation, it really worries me.
I understand being worried about the goaltending situation, but you look at goaltending and that's one of those positions that's just so hard to predict, to figure out. I think they're actually going to be okay. Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill, Laurent Brossoit, those aren't necessarily names that are going to instill a ton of confidence in you, but Logan Thompson actually did pretty well last season. Mm-hmm. I think Aiden Hill, just given his size, and I've seen, games with the Sharks early on where he was good. He just needs to stay healthy. Injuries derailed everything last season. I think the potential is there. And then, I mean, we'll see when Brossoit gets back. The organization isn't really giving any clear answers on that. But I think this is a team that will solidify things defensively. And that's what's going to make it easier on the goaltending. I look at their defense. Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, Alec Martinez, Zach Whitecloud, Braden McNabb, Nicholas Hague. Still need to get Hague signed, but they'll figure that out. That is a really solid top 60. And you look at Bruce Cassidy's numbers throughout his time coaching Boston, and the one thing he does better than anything else is solidify the defense and make sure that defensively you're not giving up very much. I think he's going to make it as easy as possible on the goaltenders, whoever's in net. And we've seen this happen in the NHL, where if you are solid defensively and you're a good enough team, doesn't matter a ton who's in goal. You can be good enough over the course of a regular season over a large sample size. I think they're going to ride the hot hand, whoever that is, and I think they can make it work. And I think Bruce Cassidy is going to be a big reason for that. On offense, I think you hit on the two biggest questions. One, can Mark Stone stay healthy? And two, can Jack Eichel return to his elite self? And I think the answer to both is yes. Mark Stone thing, I have a little less confidence in. It's an injury issue. I just don't know, but I know he will play through whatever he possibly can to get out there on the ice. And I think, it'll probably be okay. That one I don't have as much confidence in as the Jack Eichel thing, because I liked what I saw in flashes last season, but you could tell he was still working his way back, and that trying to hit the ground running mid-season was just difficult for him. Getting that full training camp in, I'm a big believer in Eichel's talent, a big believer in the ability. I think he's going to get back to that real 1C level, and I think it's going to pay dividends for Vegas, especially over the course of a full regular season. He just needs those reps in.
Yeah. So, all right. Said a lot of stuff there. I'm going to try to break it down piece by piece. All right. So, goaltending wise, I agree. I thought Logan Thompson looked really good last year. I do think that, yes, they'll probably figure out the goaltending and they're going to make it work there. I think somebody is going to surprise to the upside. That generally, if you're going to get, you got three goaltenders you're going to kind of rotate through, you will find someone who's going to have a good season, right?
Now, quick question there. Now, former scout, Portland Winterhawks, is Adin Hill the guy that's going to surprise? Let's talk goaltending eye test.
I don't think so.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know, and I certainly don't know because we still haven't seen him really get a huge workload. And that's the thing. I think Adin Hill's one of those kind of perfect backup guys. He can come in for any game, right? And just do well in that one game kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I do think that there are some holes there that if he got 40 starts in a season, the book would be written on him, and that might then kind of be it. You know what I mean? that's kind of how I feel about Adin Hill. So I feel like he'll probably be the guy who is the number 2 for whoever ends up winning the starting job, and I think that's probably going to be Logan Thompson. That's how I think things are going to shake out. Defensively, I think, yes, this defensive group is phenomenal. I mean, it's just, there's nothing else you can say about it. Is this the year Shea Theodore can put himself in Norris, talk land? I think it should be. If I'm Bruce Cassidy and I'm coming in, that's one of the things I'm looking at. Is I look at last season, and again, obviously there was the injuries to guys like Stone. Eichel wasn't there for the full season and everything, but Shea Theodore was third on this team in points. He was one of only 3 guys to crack 50 points on this team. He had 14 goals. Take advantage of that. Really put him in spots to succeed. I know they did that a lot with Pietrangelo last year, but Pietrangelo's another year older. I think Pietrangelo's defense is a little better than Shea Theodore's. I'd like to see them kind of switch roles a little bit, or at least some of those moments where they were really kind of pushing Pietrangelo to be that offensive guy. It's like, no, you have Shea Theodore. That's his bread and butter. Just let it be him. Let him run the first unit power play. Let him go. Let it, unleash him like they would in overtimes, right? How many overtime games did it seem like Shea Theodore was just like, no, I'm just going to win this game for us 3-on-3. You know what I mean? Like, the dude is so talented.
With that much space, his skating is just unmatched.
Yeah, the dude is so talented. I really want to see him, put up like a 65-point season, because I think he's totally capable of it. And if I'm Vegas, I lean heavily into that. I really try to do that, and that takes some of the pressure off the returning guys like Mark Stone or a Jack Eichel. Obviously, Mark Stone brings a lot to the table as far as what he can do offensively for you and defensively and all that stuff through the neutral zone. I don't think you need to ride him as your offense. The Jack Eichel stuff, I don't know that he's going to return to elite 1C, production, at least offensively. I just don't know. We saw kind of flashes of it last year, but not like enough to make me think that oh yeah, no, and a point per game pace this season is totally in the cards for him. I think he'll probably get around, he might have a similar stat line actually to what Jonathan Marchessault had last year, where it's like a 30 goal, 65 point season, which isn't bad. I just don't know that that's going to be, quite what everybody is expecting from him. Yeah, otherwise, I look at this, it's a good team. It's a solid team. I don't think they're as scary as they were in years past. And I think some of that... Okay,
I
sorry.
think you can make an argument this probably is the worst team they've ever come into training camp with.
Yeah, and yes, you've added in Phil the Thrill. Super excited about that. Love Phil Kessel, right? Like, let's go, and everything that he can bring. But at the same time, I just everybody's a year older. Looking at how many of these guys are now over the 30 mark, right? So much of what their core is, not seeing a ton of depth. I mean, even a lot of like the younger guys that they were adding for depth and the cheap contracts and all of that stuff. I mean, Keegan Kolesar is 25 already. You know what I mean? Like time is just marching forward for this Vegas team, and I don't know. I think they're going to be a playoff team, but I don't know that they have what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. Looking at it.
All right, I'm glad you brought up Phil Kessel because I was waiting to mention this,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the Phil Kessel acquisition. You talk
Yeah.
about depth, you talk about scoring, and last half of the division preview, I think we talked a lot about veteran players who kind of find a spark after
Yep.
being moved to a good team again. Tell me Phil Kessel's not going to have some moments where he just takes over a game.
Oh yeah. No, I mean he has those wherever he goes. I've seen it in
Yep.
person. He is that dude is fantastic. Um but again, he's 34. Like at some
I, I
point.
will. I think he'll surprise to the upside this season. I think he's going to be really, I'll say, thrilled to be in Vegas
All
and in a
right.
situation where he can contend again. And then one other potential depth forward piece that I think might help is Brendan Stone. And I know there's question marks there about whether he'll be in the lineup, whether he'll make the roster, all that stuff. But I think he's a guy who has a potential to chip in some scoring there if he makes the team, if he can play at the NHL level, and he
Mhm.
might be exactly what they need.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. It's going to be an interesting team. I just, yeah, like I said, I don't know. Does William Karlsson find himself again? I don't know. What's Riley Smith going to look like this year? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many of those questions that you could ask yourself looking at this lineup that it's really hard. And we'll talk about it later when we kind of give our division, predictions about where everybody's going to finish. But it is a tough one to just kind of figure out where everybody is going to be and how this team is gonna perform. So, yeah, just lots of questions. It'll be interesting to get the answers to them as the season progresses. I think we're both in agreement. All four of these teams are better than the Kraken, so I don't think we need to bother with the whole, oh, is this team better than the Kraken? These teams are all better than the Kraken, so we won't do that. Everybody will just have to wait and see where we have the Kraken slotted in our division projections at the end of the video. Is there anything else you want to talk about the Vegas Golden Knights before we move on to LA, RJ?
There always is, but I think I'm gonna leave it at that for now.
All right.
Um,
You're not going to talk about how Nolan Patrick is going to come back and, prove that he was worthy of being a second overall pick and all that stuff just because he's playing in the desert.
well, actually, okay, you found page 2 of my notes. So anyway, Nolan Patrick. No, I think I will, take off the hot dog tinted glasses for now.
Okay.
And move on to the LA Kings.
Actually, what this whole thing should have been is just us trying to project what the big like player personnel controversy for this season was going to be for the Golden Knights.
Just one? I mean, I think we can
Yeah.
we could both be right. We could have totally separate ones and be right.
Yes. Will it have to do with Phil Kessel and all his late poker nights throughout the season? That's what everybody's
Yeah, I
trying
could
to
see
make
that
it
one.
already. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is Phil Kessel. He's going to find a way to make it like the most, this thing that should be completely distracting to any player, but it won't be for him at all.
Yeah,
That's what he does.
there should be just someone following his whole season, just reporting it. It'd be great.
It would be fantastic. Okay, the Los Angeles Kings, RJ. Now, last year when we did our division preview, I said that Kings team was going to surprise to the upside. I thought they were going to be, a top team, borderline playoff team. I just had a good feeling about everything coming together. I thought all their young guys were going to kind of take a step forward. I thought bringing in Philip Deneau was going to be a huge thing for them. Turns out I was right about everything. But now the question becomes, okay, you made it. You were a playoff team. You took the Oilers to a game 7. All that stuff. What can you do now, right? The expectations are here now. Before you were the underdog, you got to fly under the radar. You managed to do it because, with like a horrible defense. Like just names. You know what I mean? That was their defense. It was just whatever names they could kind of throw together there for a little while. You got a fantastic vintage Jonathan Quick season, all that kind of stuff. But now the questions begin of, can you stay there? Everybody knows what to expect from you. They're going to come into your building ready for a fight. The Kings, you lose Dustin Brown, you lose the leadership there, but you bring in a Kevin Fiala. Probably a pretty significant upgrade if we're being honest from a production standpoint. It's gonna this team just looks like a ton of fun on paper, RJ. Like you just can't
really
look
do.
at this and not think this team's gonna be a fun team to watch yet again this year.
Absolutely. And you still have that great forward group. You add Kevin Fiala. I love that move they made this offseason. Makes a ton of sense for where they are. It's going to give them a big boost offensively. I look at the blue line, still plenty of question marks there. But you asked the question, can they stay there? Because I think it's going to be a lot tougher, as you pointed out. The target's going to be on your back more. And I do have some real questions about this team. I think they're going to be fun no matter what. But are they going to be solid? And I still think you need some of those younger guys to take over in a way that they didn't last season in order to sustain that. I need to see something more from Quentin Byfield, from Arthur Kaliyev, even, Turcotte coming up, if he could be an impact player. And I'm a little skeptical that we see that this season. I think longer term, I like where their prospects are, but you have some question marks there. Can Drew Doughty and Anze Kopitar replicate their excellent seasons they had last year? They're going to be 32 and 35. It's possible in that age range, but it's tougher. Like you said, the clock is ticking, on some of those guys. And I see a team that's still very reliant on their veteran players. Jonathan Quick is a big one who you mentioned. Like, he had to carry the team last year. And I think goaltending's still a big question mark here. Cal Peterson, he was supposed to be the future in net. Just looked off all of last season to me. I don't know. He wasn't himself. And if that continues, Jonathan Quick is 36 years old. He'll be 37 in January. How comfortable are you with him really carrying the load? So there are certain big questions I have about this team, and I don't know that they're going to be able to all step up in the way that they need to stay as good as they were last year.
I agree. I think a lot of their surprise to the upside last year was the season they got from Jonathan Quick. I just think he was, like I said, he was just kind of vintage Jonathan Quick. He shook off years and years of accumulated rust to put together the season that he put together for them last year, and really was able to shoulder a big load that, he wasn't expected to after, the Cal Peterson signing and all that kind of stuff, where it was, oh yeah, this is supposed to be our guy. I don't think that that's repeatable. I don't think that Jonathan Quick is going to be able to do that again. Will he go back to being like maybe as bad as he was before? Maybe not. I'm sure he refound some magic. I think the culture and everything around the team is a little different now, and I think that becomes like a rising tide lifts all boats type thing. But they need their other goaltender to show why he got that contract. And I think there's an okay chance of that happening. Defense, it is really rough. There's no way around that. It's really, really rough. We're going to have to just kind of wait and see how they play. If, at the end of the day, all they essentially have to do is make sure that they don't give up too many ridiculous chances to an opposing team, because the offense is so deep, and the offense should be so productive. And so, in that sense, maybe it'll be all right? You're not asking too much of this defense. You're not asking them to drive the offense. You're not asking them to have to play shutdown D because you're totally worried about your goaltending situation or something. You're just asking them to not be bad. And I feel like that's kind of an attainable goal for most groups. We'll see if they can do it again. Offensively, well, let's talk about Kopitar. I think Kopitar is just one of these guys who could play like this probably until he's 40. I think he's been one of the most underappreciated guys in the NHL for the last 10, 15 years. We're on the West Coast, greater Los Angeles area. We've been able to appreciate him in a way that a lot of people haven't, certainly nationally. He has just been one of the best hockey players on the face of this planet for that last 10 or 15 years. There's no way around it. Is he going to have the offense that he had last year? maybe 67 points isn't totally repeatable for him, but I don't know. I mean, if he finds himself playing with some of the guys that they have now offensively, it's entirely possible that he could put up points like that again. But really, with him, it's the leadership, it's the two-way play, it's the fact that you can send him out there against anybody, and that anybody isn't going to do anything, right? That's a big deal, and having that around takes so much pressure off the rest of your forward group. The fact that you have your shutdown guy, and your shutdown guy can not only shut down players but also provide a decent amount of offense. That is huge, because then you look at their second line, which was able to unlock the offensive potential of a Philip Deneau, because he didn't have to be the shutdown guy anymore, right? He was able to just kind of focus on being offensive and driving play in that regard, and I think that was huge for them. Are some of the guys that that came onto the scene in a big way offensively going to have similar seasons? Probably not going to be able to bank on 35 goals from Adrian Kempe again, realistically. Probably going to be in the 25 to 30 goal range if we're being realistic. That being said, his shooting percentage was only it was 14.2. Obviously there's room for regression there, but it's not like it was like 19 and we're going to see like big regression, right? So I think that there's hope for them there. On him, Victor Arvidsson just had a Victor Arvidsson season. Love to see him play a full 82 if that's possible. And then bringing in Kevin Fiala, I don't know, that's a lot. But even further down, Trevor Moore, Alex Iafallo, like these guys are all capable of 15 plus goals. And as you just start going through, you realize, oh, there might be like 10 of them if a Kaliev steps up, if Byfield steps up, right? Like this is a team that could have 10 guys score 15 goals reasonably over the course of a season, and that's just offense that is hard to match.
It is. The forward depth can be really impressive, and it's got the potential to be even more impressive, as you mentioned, with Kaliev and maybe Byfield even stepping up. And it's kind of this older generation, not really those top draft picks that you think of who provide that depth. You mentioned Alex Iafallo, Trevor Moore. I mean, he was really impressive last season, and especially in the playoffs too. If they can keep that up, it's going to be hard to run with these forwards. It's just going to be one of those teams that stacked it forward, big question marks on D, but that's always fun to watch.
Yeah, and so let's real quick talk about it. Quentin Byfield, obviously lots of expectations, second overall pick, all that kind of stuff. Started last year the worst way possible, right? With a significant leg injury. Got to deal with getting healthy from that. Got to go through your rehab stint in the AHL. It was supposed to kind of be his breakout year. Didn't go according to plan. And then by the time he finally gets back into the lineup, the top six was completely set with Kopitar and Deneau down the middle. There wasn't really room for him, and they just said, hey, guess what? You get to learn the defensive side of the game as our checking line center. Go have fun with that. And to his credit, he did do a very good job with it. Talked about it last year. I think people forget how big he is. He is 6'5", 220. He's a big man. He is capable of using
bit of
that body.
too.
Yeah, he's capable of using his body. He's capable of working all that stuff. I think this year they're going to, especially as Kopitar gets older, right, they're going to start wanting to have them maybe change roles in certain situations a little bit. I think this is the year that we can now expect that kind of breakout Quentin Byfield season. What's it going to look like from a points perspective? I don't know. I don't think it'll be super huge. I think it'll be a little bit more modest, but I think we're going to see him, he kind of added that defensive side of his game, to his game last year. I think we're going to see a really nice two-way season from him. My big takeaway looking at this team, RJ, as I look at their stats from last year, everybody on this team were volume shooters. The amount of guys on this team that had over 200 shots on goal is huge. The fact that they only had a handful of guys over a 10% shooting percentage because everybody was just throwing as many pucks on net as possible. And to be honest, I think that's a really smart move for this team. When you have the offense that these guys have, when you have the size that all of these guys have, because, I just mentioned it with Byfield, all of these guys we've mentioned have size and strength to get to the net. I like their kind of strategy of just, we're going to throw a million shots on net. We're going to drive the net and get there. And, we'll be there for the rebounds. We'll snipe it if we can. If not, we're going to be there for the rebound, and we're just going to wear defenses out. and I think that they're going to be able to repeat that strategy this year with this team, and yeah, it's going to be impressive.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that you'd hope is sustainable, given volume shooting generally is more sustainable, not as reliable on the shooting percentage. Part of me wants to throw in the whole, oh well, Todd McClellan Sharks teams threw a bunch of pucks on net too. They were just from all, low chance areas, and so you weren't able to really challenge goalies during the playoffs and all that. But I'll let that one go for now. We'll see how it goes if they get to the postseason and beyond.
Yeah, I feel like this team, because I understand those concerns, but I feel like after watching them last year, they were a little better about getting in a little deeper, doing it more so from the slot, having guys net front, all that kind of stuff. Like I feel like this group, because again, I mean, you're talking about you could have 9 guys have 15 goals, and oh yeah, all 9 of those guys are like 6'3" plus. You know what I mean? Like they're just all massive human beings on top of being supremely skilled. So it'll be interesting. But that's where I look at guys like a Kaliev, 7.2 shooting percentage. He's capable of upping that. You know what I mean? In which case he's going to have a lot more than 14 goals next year. So it's going to be fun to watch, at least in the regular season. Yeah, I think this Kings team has the staying power, assuming they can find a goaltender to play well for them, because that's what it'll all come down to. The defense isn't going to be great. We talked about that. But if they can find one goaltender to stay in there and get even just like a 9-10 save percentage type year, they'll be all right.
Agreed.
All right. The Edmonton Oilers, RJ. Would you consider that them vanquishing their playoff demons last year?
Yeah, I would say so, to an extent. And certainly looking at how dominant the Avalanche looked, as the team that knocked them out, nobody was beating that Avs team. So I think you can feel good about that.
Yeah, I certainly do. It answered a lot of questions I had about them, just in a lot of ways. And I think, a lot of it came down to whether we want to admit it or how anybody feels about it. Evander Kane, the acquisition of Evander Kane really just kind of unlocked this team. It made all the pieces fit in their top 6 in a way that I feel like they were kind of struggling to the last couple seasons when it comes to McDavid and Draisaitl. And heck, if Draisaitl stays healthy, I mean, that dude was basically playing on one leg last year. It's possible they were able to give Colorado a little bit more of a run for their money. You know what I mean? But I think just so much of this Oilers team comes down to having Evander Kane and his skill set just making it all work in a way we haven't seen before.
Right. It certainly unlocked something for the Oilers last season, and to have a full season of him too, he gels so well with Connor McDavid. He's the answer that they were looking for on that line. Yes, you want that kind of straight line physical guy to play on a line with Connor McDavid. It works so well. And someone who's just a little bit more talented with the puck, well, probably a lot more talented with the puck than, say, a Zach Kassian, to make it work. And Evander Kane is just the perfect fit stylistically there. Now, there are still question marks with him. I think he plays a very physical style of hockey. He's getting older there for a winger who plays that type of game. I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of decline, just an ability. You look at aging curves, and especially for wingers who play like he does, already he's at that point where history would tell you there might be some decline there. But still, with the players surrounding him, playing on a line with Connor McDavid, on a power play with McDavid and Draisaitl, it doesn't take a lot to put up insane amounts of production if you can just stay healthy. And I think that it's pretty much guaranteed for him if he can just stay on the ice.
Yeah, and not just stay on the ice from a health standpoint, but also stay on the ice from
I said stay on the ice.
Yeah. Don't go out and just get suspended for no good reason. Yeah, I think he's gonna be fine for this year as far as when we're looking at him breaking down. Keep in mind, earlier on in his career, he didn't play quite the same physical style. It took a little while for that to develop for him. And then just the amount of time he has missed in his career means that he's got less mileage in that sense. Yeah, I just think having him around, like we said, it really makes it easier to define first and second lines for them. And I feel like that's all that they were missing. It's certainly all that they were missing for the playoffs, and it worked beautifully for them last year. I felt like last year was the first year where I would confidently say Connor McDavid is now a two-way center. You know what I mean? Like, there was certainly in the playoffs, and especially in that Kings series. I mean, that dude took that series over at times in ways that we hadn't seen him do. We knew he was capable of doing it offensively, but there was just times where he would just come out and it was just, they are not going to lose that game, and he was going to do it in all three zones to make sure that they were not going to lose that game. So I think Connor McDavid has kind of finally reached his final form, and that's just, good luck rest of the NHL, like, in dealing with that. I think injuries are going to be a concern for this team overall. I think they're going to do what they need to do to get by in the regular season no matter what. This will be a playoff team, just because you're going to have the insane production up top and everything. It's just going to be a matter of, can everybody get to the playoffs relatively healthy? Can you get all your injuries out of the way, in the regular season? Because it is a group that is top heavy. If McDavid goes down, that's obviously an extremely significant loss. If Draisaitl goes down, that is a very significant loss. If Evander Kane goes down or is suspended, that's a significant loss, right? Can they survive if one of those guys gets hurt? No, by the way, all of them have injury history. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, it isn't like, you're just being like, oh, if obviously their best player gets hurt, it's a problem. It almost feels more like a matter of when with this group rather than if. And that's certainly a concern for them. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, obviously killing it, doing what he's doing. Yarvi killing it, doing what he's doing, kind of gets that 1 year prove it deal there. I think he's going to take some step forwards. Hopefully we'll see some more offensively from him, just because, I mean, we love that guy, right? I mean, even just today, right? Putting out the video, riding the bike, singing along, cooling his dog off. It's just totally awesome there. But the real question is going to be, RJ, and I think this is the question everybody's going to be asking throughout the course of the season. Is Jack Campbell the guy to fix them in net?
Now, it's an interesting question because you look at goaltending, there's always some weirdness with it. And Jack Campbell, I think he's not an elite goalie. And honestly, I think probably the 5 years of term were a mistake there. And I'd say that for most goalies on that contract. Mm-hmm. But I think he's pretty inarguably an upgrade from 40-year-old Mike Smith. Yeah. And I will say Smith did play well in the regular season each of the last 2 years. But you're only getting 30 games out of him there of decent goaltending. And I think we finally start to see Stuart Skinner play a little bit more too. Yep. So that's someone who I think has gone way under the radar. Yep. I think Skinner should have gotten more of a run for the Oilers in the past, especially with Mike Smith and all the question marks. I think you could really see him start to step up and be a big part of that goalie tandem with Jack Campbell. I think the goaltending is going to be much improved. It's going to help a lot.
Yeah, I was going to talk a ton about Stuart Skinner just because I was like, this is kind of like where I was going with the whole goaltending thing. I think Stuart Skinner is going to be a really good backup to Campbell. I think Campbell can shoulder the load and be the, for sure, starter this season. And I think he'll put up a really solid, if unspectacular, season for them. But yeah, I think Stuart Skinner is going to be a really good backup for them, and then might then ultimately turn into their long-term answer. In regards to the Jack Campbell contract, I 100% agree with you. I think he's really, going to be good for 2, maybe 3 years. But this whole team is built on this house of cards of, in 2 or 3 years, this whole situation is going to look terrible. Like the wheels are going to fall off long term. I don't like any of it. Like we talked about Evander Kane, I don't like the term on that contract either. But you know what? I think for this year, it'll be okay for them. Same thing with Jack Campbell. Defense, kind of bringing back the same group as last year. It was a mixed bag from that group. There was times where, pick any of the names off of this list, and I thought they played really, really well at times. And then there were other times where I was just like, get this person off the ice. They are doing more harm than good. You know what I mean? What does that look like over the course of a full season? I don't know. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because as long as McDavid and Draisaitl are healthy, that's all that matters.
This is a team that's just going to outscore its problems. And we've seen, I think we have a big enough sample size. They're capable of consistently outscoring their problems in a way that almost no other team is, just because of the star power they have up top. The defense just needs to be good enough. And looking at that list, Yeah, I mean, they were good enough last season. They can be good enough this season. Maybe you're hoping Evan Bouchard takes a step forward, and that's certainly possible. I don't know. It is what it is, and they're going to outscore the problems.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked about this with the Kings on the last one, right? Like the defense just has to be good enough, right? Like, and I have way more questions about that Kings group than I do about this group. This group can
Sure.
be good enough. You know what I mean? So I'm not worried about them there. Yeah, it's a top heavy team, but it's an Oilers team. It's the same team that we've seen the last couple of years. Only maybe things are a little bit more steady, and you're going to see even more scoring just because of having a full season of Evander Kane, and that's just scary for this division. There's
Yep.
just
Sure
no
is.
no way around it. Now, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the final team we're going to be talking about, which is the Calgary Flames, because lots of large, significant, like franchise player level changes went on in Calgary this offseason. RJ, uh, out go Johnny Gaudreau in free agency to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Out is Matthew Tkachuk, the like guy that just felt like he was going to be their franchise player until he was like 37. You know what I mean? He's gone, shipped off to Florida in exchange for Jonathan Huberdeau. You sign a Nazem Kadri. What are you thinking about this team? Because I'm having a really hard time figuring out if I think that they can repeat and be a playoff group or not.
You have so much turnover on a team, and this is maybe the most turbulent offseason we've seen from any team in a while. Uh, you have to have someone who can keep everything together and make it all work. You have to have some kind of structure from the top. Because looking at it from a talent perspective, and you might agree with me on this, yes, a ton of talent goes out the door in Gaudreau and Kachuk. But I think in Jonathan Huberdeau, in Nazem Kadri, and in Mackenzie Weegar, because I think that's
Yeah.
another big piece coming back, you probably have enough raw talent to make up for that, to where it's almost a wash. But you've got the turnover, you've got the basically change in the guard of this team, and you need someone to hold it all together. And last division preview, I said that I would not bet against a Daryl Sutter team. It's just something I can't bring myself to
Mm-hmm.
do, and I'm going to stick with that here. I think the talent is still there. I look at the blue line, and like I think this blue line is really good, and
Yes, it is.
you have some low key, very good guys like Noah Hannafin figured something out last season. He was great. Rasmus Anderson, another underrated player. Zadorov, Chris Tanev, just really solid. Shillington finally figured it out, had his breakout year. And then you add Mackenzie Weegar to that group. You got Yusuf Alamaki too. It's just a really good blue line, really 1 through 7. Um, that's going to help out a lot on a Daryl Sutter team. You've got the same goaltending. Jacob Markstrom, solid. Daniel Vladar, solid. And the forwards, they're going to have to figure some things out. Yeah, you're missing your two best forwards. Jonathan Huberdeau, we can talk about that 8-year extension and the long-term contract and the effects of that going forward. But this season, I think he's still going to be really good. Nazem Kadri, huge regression candidate, but he's still a good player for right now. We can talk about the term, but I think really this is a team that has pushed all their chips in for the next 2 to 3 years. And will they win the division again? No, I don't think so. But I think they will stay in the playoffs and stay a good team. What do you think?
I think they're going to be on the playoff bubble. To be honest, I think yes, you brought in talented players. I really like Jonathan Huberdeau. I think he's just one of the best pure passers we have in the NHL today. I really like Nazem Kadri, but I like Nazem Kadri as a complementary piece, as your 2C, kind of what he's been, in his previous stops, what he was for Colorado. I just look at this and I say 219 points walked out the door in those two players, in Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. 82 goals walked out the door when Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk walked out the door. And Jonathan Huberdeau and Nazem Kadri are not replacing that level of production. And Mackenzie Weegar even. You know what I mean? It's possible the three of them maybe get to that level of production. And not only that, this team, it's a Sutter team. It's a Daryl Sutter team. Though that line of Gaudreau, Tkachuk, and Lindholm kind of succeeded offensively, in spite of being on a Sutter team, right? Like And I just don't know that anybody else is going to be able to pull that off. I think Nazem Kadri, as you said, candidate for regression. Lindholm, candidate for regression. He's not going to be playing with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, the two guys that I feel like really drove the offense for that line. I do not think that you can bank on another 42 goal campaign from him. Andrew Mangiapane, we expecting 35 goals again? I'm not, when his shooting percentage was 18.9% and he only took 185 shots in 82 games. Okay, he could score 20 next year. You know what I mean? Like that would be more reasonable. So I just look at this and I go, where is the offense supposed to be? Because if you sort this group based on goals from last season and you take out that top line of Tkachuk, Lindholm, Gaudreau, and you take out Mangiapane, your next highest goal scorer was Dylan Dubé at 18.
Oof.
Yeah, really exciting, right? Like that's sexy offense right there. No, this team, I don't see where the offense is supposed to come from. I agree with you. This blue line is fantastic. It's a super underrated blue line because it doesn't have that like one star piece, that Norris caliber guy that makes everybody pay attention to it. It's a really solid blue line. They play to the system. Everything works there. You got what you need to get out of your goaltenders, Markstrom and Vladar. They are good. They're solid in that system. You know what I mean? Like you're all set there. I just look at this and I just go, I don't know how they're supposed to outscore opponents in the games in which they have to outscore opponents. You know what I mean? You can beat up on all the bad teams with this group because of the system and your goaltending and your defense. But anytime you have to play in this division, you got to go play Edmonton, you got to go play LA, you got to go play Vegas, you got to go play Vancouver and their offense. I don't know how this team is supposed to keep up with them over the course of an 82 game season. You're going to win some of those games, but I think you're going to lose a majority of those. And then you start looking at the rest of the Western Conference and you count all those losses. And I don't know. I have real worries about this group.
It's going to look different than it did last season. You're not going to beat those teams, by outscoring them. I think last season it was a different looking Flames team than you would maybe expect under Daryl Sutter. I think it was kind of moving toward his image, but it wasn't, even though you had all these shutouts too. I mean, Markstrom and Vladar got a ton of shutouts. You saw games like that, but they were also able to score at such a high rate. I think it's not going to be as pretty. I think they're going to be able to do enough to get the job done, and maybe in a way that Daryl Sutter might even prefer. But I look at the blue line and I just don't see how they can be all that bad. I got to mention Mackenzie Weegar again. I think he's finally going to get credit for just how good he is. In Florida, a lot, and especially in Ekblad's shadow, a lot of that, gets kind of thrown under the rug, just given how the media landscape works. It's Florida. We know this from, following the California teams. It happens. But Weegar is one of those guys, although I worry about it maybe in the Canadian market, because he'll tend to have turnovers in his own zone that are, very, very bad. But overall, he's really solid. But we'll see how the media and everything environment deals with that. But I think he's finally going to get some more credit.
Yeah, I think he's in for a good season. We're on the same page. This blue line is really, really good. It's really fantastic. It's just, you're going to throw wave after wave of, McDavid line, Draisaitl line against them. They're going to crack eventually. Throw wave after wave of, Kopitar, Danault at them. They're going to crack eventually. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those that all their games are going to be like 3-2, 2-1. I just don't know that they're going to be on the winning side of as many of them next year. So that's true. That's all.
Daryl Sutter's, he's never found a way to be on the winning side of the games.
Right. I love the center depth and I love the two-way play. Playoff time is different. Is this team like built for the playoffs and to grind it out in a playoff series? Of course it is. But you got to get there. You know what I mean? And that was kind of his problem in his previous stops too. You could have that playoff success, but in the years in which you don't make the playoffs, doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? So I love the two-way depth at center that you have with Kadri, with Lindholm, but I just don't know that it's going to be enough to overcome the offensive deficiencies here. And that's just this is my take on them.
All right.
All right, so it's ranking time, RJ.
It's time.
It is
Which you've
definitely
all been
time.
waiting for.
Yes. All right, division ranking projection time. Throw up the graphic. RJ, I want to hear who you think is winning this division this year.
This year, I have the Edmonton Oilers winning the division. I mean, we talked about it. We both think that they have scary potential. Oddly enough, for an Oilers team, it seems like they have the most consistent, players that we're confident in. So yeah, I'm going with Edmonton to win the division.
Same thing, same reasoning. I just think they've got the firepower. I think goaltending. They figured that out for this year. One of those two guys is gonna do it, and the defense is good enough. So yeah, Edmonton all the way for me. Coming in second, I really struggled with this one, RJ. I really, really did.
Sure.
I'm going LA Kings. I just think that offense.
Ah,
I just think that offense is going to be too much for teams to keep up with. I think it's going to be a lot for them to handle. And as much as I don't think they're going to have the goaltending this year to kind of cover up for that defense, I'm just not sure it's going to matter looking at the amount of offense that they have.
I can't say I'm surprised that you went with LA second in the division. You want to go with the upside with that team, I'm sure, and we'll see if they have the staying power. I got to disagree with you on this one. I knew you would not have the same answer for number 2 in the division. I'm going with the Vegas Golden Knights.
Okay.
Yes, I'm all in on them being better than most people think. I already gave my whole Golden Knights argument there. I think they're going to be better than everyone anticipates. I think they hold things together, and it's good enough for second in the division.
Yeah, and to be honest, I got Vegas third. Right as we move into that.
Okay.
I do have Vegas third. I thought about Vegas second. I think if the Kings get any sort of goaltending, the Kings will be better than Vegas this year, and I'll just kind of bank on that. But no, this Vegas team is very, very good. They are solid. They have the blue line, like I said. I think one of their 3 goaltenders is gonna figure it out and be good this year. You know what I mean? Like the odds are just too much in their favor in that regard. I don't know that they have kind of the offensive depth that maybe the Kings or Edmonton has or anything like the high-end scoring and all that kind of stuff, but they are deep enough, certainly, to make the playoffs this year.
Okay, that tells me you're buying at least a little bit of what I'm selling with Vegas there. So, and third, I'm going to go with the LA Kings. And this is another one where I could see the Kings moving up into second, surpassing Vegas. So I'm buying a little bit of what you're selling with the LA Kings, to make it fair there. Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna have some staying power. Yeah, I think it'll be similar to last season, and that'll be good for third in the division, just like last year.
Yes. Now things get interesting. All right, as we get into like teams that might be on the playoff bubble. We're not going to predict playoffs. We don't need to predict if these teams will make the playoffs or not. But at 4, I had a little bit of a tough time at 4, but ultimately I'm going with Calgary. I think the Sutter system wins out, and they're able to finish ahead of Vancouver, despite the fact that I think this is a team that might only that might be like bottom 10 for sure, maybe even pushing bottom 5 as far as goals for.
Right. And I also have Calgary at number 4. I didn't question as much as you did. I'm pretty confident. If anything, it's a little to the downside. If those question marks in LA don't work out, I could even see them moving up to 3. But I've got them solidly in at 4 ahead of Vancouver.
All right, and then I think we both have Vancouver probably in 5th.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think we can agree on that one.
Yeah, we talked a lot about them last year. They're going to get that solid above average but not elite goaltending from Thatcher Demko, and that's going to be good for them. I think offensively they got a lot of pieces that they can work with, and the blue line isn't that bad either. So I think Vancouver's good. They should be, I think, even more kind of playoff bubbly than they were last season. Next, it's got to be Seattle though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Has to be the Seattle Kraken at 6th in the division. And, it's one of those where looking at the division standings and kind of where we're predicting it, you'd like a better result, than 6th. It's just tough with all the teams ahead of them. I think there's some potential there after all the changes to move to the upside. But I think look at the other teams. We talked about, are they better than the Kraken or not? And I think we got that solid top 4, and then we did decide Vancouver was. So I'm going with Seattle at 6.
Yeah, I mean, look, Seattle has a lot of things going for them. Philip Grubauer probably not going to turn in a historically horrible goaltending season. I think that changes a lot. I really do. Power play, hopefully it's not as bad as it was last year. That also would lead to more wins in the win column than they had last season. I just think, you know, they made a lot of changes to the top six, bringing in Burakovsky, Bjorkstrand, all that stuff. But hey, guess what? You're right back to figuring out chemistry with everybody, trying to rely on a training camp to get everybody up to speed with each other. Matty Beniers, first full season for him. Is Shane Wright going to play? All that stuff. I just feel like it's a year too early for Seattle, though the future is bright. They are certainly trending upwards. I think they will definitely be a strong playoff contender the following season. I just look at things this year, and I think it's just a little bit too soon for them. Now, I think arguably the hardest and toughest decision we had, RJ, we kind of talked about this beforehand, was figuring out who's going to finish last. And then, you know, who was going to finish second to last in this division. Between San Jose and Anaheim, it was really, really tough. So why don't you go ahead and tell me your bottom two together, who you think is going to avoid that fate of being the bottom of the Pacific?
I think the Sharks are going to be the team to avoid that fate, and probably not for their best interest long term. I think as a team, you probably want to be at the bottom of the division in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, given how bad they are as a team. But I just think they're going to finish very, very narrowly ahead of Anaheim. I don't think the Ducks are going to start quite as hot as they did last season. They'll suffer in points that way, but this is such a close race for the bottom of the division. Both of these teams just have so many glaring holes. It's quite a gap at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip them from what you have. I think certainly at the start of the season, the Sharks are going to be more solid than Anaheim. I do not think the Ducks are going to come out of the gates all that great just because of everything. You got to figure out who your first line center is. Is it Zegras? He's got to adjust to that. McTavish has to get worked into the lineup. There's a lot of stuff that they have to deal with there. However, I think over the course of a full season of everybody playing together, heating up, I do think McTavish is for real. I think Zegras is for real. I think having Ryan Strome as kind of the veteran center that they can kind of lean on in certain situations will add up. And ultimately, this is it for me. I think John Gibson is going to kind of have the same resurgence that Quick had last year, just because new culture, new life in that locker room with the young guys taking over, all that stuff. Essentially a zero pressure season. Nobody's expecting anything out of this Ducks team. I think that helps John Gibson start to find himself again, certainly over the course of a season. I think they can pull together enough games to finish ahead of San Jose. Because I look at the San Jose team, and as we talked about last week in the first part of our division preview, this is a team that has no goaltending, no defense, and really no offensive depth to speak of. If their top three guys aren't outscoring the opposing team on any given night, they're not going to win a game. And I just think over an 82-game season, that's not going to be good for more than, 25 at most wins. Like I just don't see it for the Sharks team. I don't see any hope. I don't see anything that's gonna like trigger, you know, a second half of the season, like breath of fresh air. Let's make a little run or put together a little hot streak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it, and it's going to be close, but both of these teams are going to be near the bottom of the division.
Yeah.
We'll see how that race shakes out. It'll be an exciting one to follow toward the end of the season.
Yeah, that's definitely what I think all eyes are going to be on in this division. It's certainly not going to be, you know, which Alberta team is up there solid. Can the Kings kind of repeat everything? Vegas, what do they look like? No, you're missing it if you're not paying attention to those bottom three sea-ish dwelling creatures in the Kraken, the Ducks, and the Sharks. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for our division preview, for both parts of it. If you were around for both, if you missed out on our first part, make sure you go and listen to that from last week. It was really good, and we talked about that. You got a little bit of a hint and a sprinkling of what we talked about just now as we ranked the division. But ultimately, what I really want to hear from you guys is, what is your division preview, rankings, projections? Why can I never remember the word projections this week, RJ? That's kind of what this whole thing is about. We got some of them last week, some very interesting ones. Very interesting. Vegas, definitely the team everybody is either really high on or they think they're going to kind of be in for a repeat of last year. It's been very interesting seeing that from everybody. I'm interested to see kind of how people rank Calgary after all their changes too. Because I had such a hard time with it, I got to imagine everybody is. So please make sure to leave your projections for the Pacific Division in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Season is almost upon us, and that includes all the goodies we'll be doing: weekly podcasts, post-game lives after every Kraken game, as well as just other fun hockey-related videos sprinkled in as well for some more content. So make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already, and like this video so other hockey fans can find it. And we will see you all next time.